President Rand Paul, may not sound too catchy, but Rand Paul being the Republican nominee for president in 2016 could actually be a good thing, maybe even the best thing that happens to Democrats, or that has happened to Democrats in our nation for a long time. Let me explain. Political commentator Peter Biner has a new piece in The Atlantic where he writes that now that Chris Christie has been knocked out of the #1 spot in the Republican Party, Rand Paul is the likely frontrunner for the Republican presidential nod in 2016. Biner writes that if Chris Christie was ever the frontrunner for the 2016 Republican presidential nomination, he isn't anymore. So if Christie is no longer the candidate to beat in the 2016 Republican race, who is? Believe it or not, it's Rand Paul. He goes on to write that the 2016 election could turn out to be like the election of 1964, when the dark horse, weird, fringe, ultra-conservative candidate Barry Goldwater became the Republican Party's nominee. As Biner puts it, it's just possible that 2016 could be another 1964 or 1980, years when the Republican establishment proved weak and pliable enough to allow a candidate previously considered extreme to come in from the cold. Biner says the reason for this, in addition to the fact that Rand Paul has good polling numbers, is that there's an existing infrastructure of Paul support within the Republican Party, thanks to Ron Paul taking big chunks of support from Republicans in 2012. Those people who were Ron Paul followers in 2012 are now Rand Paul supporters, and they're well embedded into the Republican Party. So basically, Rand Paul has a very good shot at becoming the Republican nominee for president in 2016. So why is it that that might be a good thing for Democrats and maybe even for our nation? Well, the answer is really simple. A Rand Paul Republican candidacy could force Democrats to move way to the left. Let me explain. Rand Paul hates things like Social Security and Medicare. This is very right. He hates long-term unemployment benefits and opposes the minimum wage altogether. Very right. He's even said that companies should be able to discriminate based on race or gender or sexual orientation. Very right. Economically, he thinks everything should be privatized, with the only exceptions being the military, police forces, and our judiciary. And he's totally opposed to a woman's right to choose to have an abortion. Very right. But most people don't know that those are Rand Paul's positions. What people do know is that Paul is strongly opposed to the NSA snooping and spying on American citizens. They do know that he's incredibly skeptical of our nation's drone program and that he's in favor of gay marriage. And people also know that Paul is in favor of decriminalizing all drugs, not just pot. When you look at Rand Paul's position on just these issues, he appears to be way to the left of much of the official Democratic Party. So if the Democratic nominee wanted to have any chance of defeating Rand Paul, whether that nominee was Hillary Clinton, Elizabeth Warren, or Andrew Cuomo, they'd have to move way to the left of the current mainstream Democratic Party's positions. If things like this were to play out like that, and if Paul did become the Republican nominee in 2016, it's likely that the 2016 election could be the election where things start getting really populist. Can you imagine if Democrats had to become more progressive to take on a libertarian Republican candidate? Creating protectionist trade policies, decriminalizing pot, could become official parts of the Democratic Party platform just to push back on Rand Paul. Suddenly pushing for things like health care for all and legalizing marijuana would seem mainstream. Make no mistake about it, Rand Paul being on the Republican ticket for president in 2016 could be the powerful force needed to move the entire Democratic Party from presidential nominees to state assembly nominees to the left. What a remarkable outcome that would be.